Today we're going to start talking about volcanoes and plate boundaries and why we get these hazardous events happening on Earth. And the best place for us to start with that is to look at the actual structure of the Earth and how that causes hazardous events. So the Earth has quite a simple structure that is made out of 4 separate layers. So right in the center we have the inner core. And this is made completely out of a solid material. And knowing that what the different layers are made up is really, really important because it affects what happens on the surface. So we have a solid layer right in the center, and the next layer is called simply the outer core, and this is molten. And molten, all that means is that it is in a liquid form. Outside that layer is one of the most important layers in terms of volcanoes, and it's called the mantle. And this is semi-molten. Semi-molten means that it is not completely liquid, and it's not completely solid. It's almost like partially liquid. So a bit like, the best way to think of it is it's almost like honey. The way it runs, it is solid, but it can flow and it can move. And this really, really, really small layer on the top is called the crust, and this is solid. And this crust layer is very, very, very small in comparison to the other layers. It is at the most, it is about a kind of 100 kilometers deep, but usually is a lot less than that. We're going to have a look at the crust and how it interacts with the mantle, and that will explain a lot of the hazards that we get happening on Earth. So we've just looked at the 4 layers of the Earth, and I want to focus at the moment on the top 2 layers, the mantle and the crust. The best way to think of the crust is a bit like this egg here, but if the egg has been dropped on the floor and had loads of cracks on it, and the Earth is very similar. It is like the crust the Earth has been dropped and its crust is cracked into all these what we call plates. But all that is this top thin layer of the crust is broken up into all these different segments, which, because the mantle has something in it called convection currents, it means that these plates don't just stay still, they move around. But for many, many years, people didn't think that had happened, and it's only when we found evidence they'd moved around through things such as fossils that we could see that the way that the Earth looks now and the way that the plates interact has not always been the same. As I mentioned earlier, there was a widely held belief that the Earth had always looked like this. And it was only when people started suggesting theories that the Earth hadn't always looked like this and had actually changed quite a lot. These are the kind of people that started coming up with the idea that the Earth was actually made of plates, and that we started finding evidence on Earth that backed up this theory, and that the Earth had actually moved quite significantly in the time that we had been on Earth. One of the bits of evidence they found was this creature over here, which is called the Cynonaphus, which translation means dog jaw. And it was an animal that was around about 240 million years ago, and it was a land animal that couldn't swim. But what they lots of very clever scientists found out is that they found fossils of this dog jaw in South America, but then they also found it in West Africa. And the only reason they could think if this animal that couldn't swim was found in both of these areas, then it would have to be that at one point these 2 bits of land would have had to have been connected. And if we look at the actual shape of both of these landforms, we can see that this shape here and this shape here would actually fit into each other, a bit like a jigsaw. And so this kind of evidence started to suggest that maybe the Earth's surface hadn't always been the same, and this is where the idea of plate tectonics came about, where the idea that there was a layer called the crust, and on it was lots and lots of different plates which separated the earth like the eggshell we looked up, and that these plates were in fact moving about, which was causing the land masses on top to move about as well, which means that we therefore get hazards happening on the boundaries of these plates.